It waits at the edge of the final frontier. It waits for an untested crew to begin an unprecedented journey. But most of all, it waits for you. Star Trek Deep Space Nine. On January 4th, the wait will be over.
Welcome to Space Action Podcast, an extension of Space Action Heroes, a webcomic that you can find at spaceactionheroes.com. I am Chris Carson, and this week I am joined by a very special guest.
Me? Matt Morrissey!
That's you!
Hey!
Woo!
I'm on a podcast.
I am not editing that out.
Timing? Perfect.
Perfect. This is already going well. So this week, I don't want to make you feel bad or anything, but the reason you're on the podcast this week is because no one else has seen Deep Space Nine.
that makes for good quality podcasting.
Right there, yeah.
When you can't find somebody to actually do the podcast on the topic, you're bound to have tons of fans.
You know it's going to be the biggest
Pure
podcast.
gold.
Yeah. So yeah, this week's podcast topic is the 25th anniversary of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Cue music.
Space Action Podcast with your hosts Chris Carson and DC and Shama.
So, tell me about your first experience with Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Oh, I can picture it as if it was yesterday.
Oh, can you?
So, for me, I was a huge Next Generation fan. And to be honest, I was a little insulted that they were doing another Star Trek. Because
During Next Gen?
Next Gen was like at its pinnacle at that point. It was season 6?
It started in January 1995, I believe. Or
So it would have been.
It was
Next
halfway
Gen's
between
last season.
No, it was. I think it was halfway between season 5 or season 6. It started
Okay,
like
a little bit earlier.
Yeah, so on their Christmas break, and then they came back. Next Gen came back, and Deep Space Nine premiered.
Okay, so I was pissed that we weren't going to be on an Enterprise. That was, for me, that was the pinnacle of Star Trek.
That was kind
you
of the
can't do a
point.
Star Trek without an Enterprise.
Right.
But then I saw a couple episodes, really dug it, and then totally got out of it. I was like,
really?
I can't remember. The first couple episodes I loved, and then the next few were a little weaker for me, and I was just like, I'm out. And I never really went back to it until like a year ago, and I binge watched it on Netflix and loved the hell out of it. So I thought it was great.
Deep Space Nine was the first series that I actually watched live, because Next Generation went off the air when I was 11, 12. It was 93, 94.
Yeah.
So I was 12, and I was a huge original series fan, and I watched all the movies, and I obsessed over all the movies, and old Kirk and Spock and everyone. And then all of a sudden, TV Guide and Entertainment Weekly all were having series finale Next Gen covers and articles. So I was like a little 12-year-old. I was like, ooh, that's what is this? Next Generation. And I watched the last All Good Things was the first episode of Next Generation I ever watched.
Really?
Which is perfect. When you think about it, that final episode...
Well, because it ties in the pilot.
That final episode, I suggest to everyone, I'm like, if you don't want to sit and watch 177 hours of Star Trek The Next Generation, just watch the final episode.
It's the summit.
It's the best one, and you don't need to know anything going into it, because it covers all 3 timelines. Yeah. But, so I watched that final episode, and then over the summer, CTV or Chex or something aired them all. They were just all the Next Generations, and all the Deep Space Nines up to that point, which was the first 2 seasons. So that September... I got into Deep Space Nine week by week by week, and I followed it for season 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And Voyager I kind of didn't really dig out of the gate, because Voyager premiered at the same time Deep Space Nine season 3 started.
And it was a burning pile of dog shit.
It was horrible. It was just recycled Next Generation plot lines, and it was not good.
In a minivan.
And I love that ship, though. I really do love that ship.
Let's make the nacelles fold up when it goes to warp speed.
Okay, that makes no sense. It seems like they just need it. They were like, well, the D separates. So what does this
Ours
do?
is going to fold.
What are we going to fucking fold? But yeah, so I was so totally invested. And then Deep Space Nine ended the year I graduated high school and I moved out to California. So it was like the end of Deep Space Nine was like the end of my
youth.
My youth, my high school, my Ontario life back then. And it was great. It was really, really awesome. I love the idea that it's Roddenberry's ideal future. They didn't mess with that. All humans got along, everything was great, but it was them in the face of an unrelenting enemy, and what kind of compromises you have to make in Gene Roddenberry's idealistic future, what you have to do to survive the onslaught of an enemy who doesn't adhere to your values in any way, shape, or form, and is just there to kill you.
And that you can't run away from.
You can't run away from.
Stuck on a station.
And I guess just to summarize what Deep Space Nine is, in case people aren't all that familiar with it but are just listening to this podcast, the idea is that there was basically like contemporary Earth-level technology planet called Bajor. And so they weren't warp. They hadn't evolved to be warp-capable people or anything like that, although there's an episode that kind of touches on that later on about a solar sail. Whole other conversation.
Yeah, that's a deep
that's a deep dive. And the Kardashians, the monsters,
rulers of our galaxy and the Deep Space Nine galaxy.
Unfortunately, all it takes to be famous is blowing a guy on camera these days. Anyways, the lizard race invaded Bajor and used them as slave labor for 50 years. And then finally, I think from Federation pressure, I don't remember the exact details from the pilot of...
Hadn't they exhausted their resources?
I think that was it too.
They were basically, they had screwed them over and then just...
They were just done with them.
Yeah.
And so they pulled out of Bajor, and so Bajor requested Federation assistance in helping them get back on their feet. And there was a mining space station where they worked Bajorans as slaves in orbit called Terek Nor. When the Federation went to Terek Nor to set up camp, they discovered a wormhole right nearby that was a gateway to the Gamma Quadrant, and so suddenly Deep Space Nine became like the center of trade and traffic and politics.
Became like the lonesome dove from the Old West.
Right.
Where everyone was coming in and out.
Everyone was coming in and out. And interesting side point that, just as an example, I'm going to get into later about how Star Trek Discovery fucks Star Trek up so badly. But just as
in every way.
In every way. But just as a point, I love that the villains of Star Trek Deep Space Nine worked Bajorans in mining slave camps, and then in Star Trek Discovery, the Federation sends their prisoners to die in dilithium mining camps. Fuck you, Discovery. So yeah, that's basically the premise of Deep Space Nine. Mm-hmm. And then it's 7 years of standalone adventures intermixed with overarching story about the invasion of the Dominion, a Gamma Quadrant species, which, hilariously, calls themselves Gamma Quadrant species. Although it wouldn't
just
be
like we called ourselves the Alpha Quadrant species.
Right. You think they would be the Alpha Quadrant to themselves.
No, they knew. They knew they were the G of the galaxy.
Right. It's like, oh, we know you guys are the Alphas. That was always so silly to me, because there's even an episode where there's Alpha Dominion soldiers, Jemadar and Gamma Jemadar, and I'm like, why do you call yourselves that?
Not the home beings and the away beings.
Wouldn't you be Alpha to yourselves? That always confused me.
There's a few plot holes.
Mm-hmm.
So we put a black captain, or at least a black commander, in the seat in the first of the Star Treks.
Right.
So that was a big move, obviously, that the guys made. Nice transition.
Yeah, and then because it was white captain, old captain, black captain, lady captain,
yeah.
And then white captain.
Yeah. And then they went back to the well.
I love that in 2018, putting a black captain in the captain's seat would be fucking outrage to monsters. But back in 1995 when it started, everyone was like, no, it's fine. Or 93, sorry. They're like, yay! Star Trek is about progressiveness. Yeah. Why wouldn't you do that?
Exactly.
I love that we were a little more culturally sensitive in the 90s.
Back then than we are
now.
With some topics.
With some things. But the rise of regressiveness makes it now just like the idea of having... I guess they have a gay character in Discovery now, and that's great. I mean, fuck Discovery, but
well, they kind of did in Next Gen. I mean, they dabbled with it, but it was like a non-gendered kind of character. Remember that?
Oh, when Riker was fucking the thing, the genderless thing.
Yeah.
And that was the one episode.
It really looked like a boy.
Yeah. Well, speaking of...
Riker will just go after anything with a warm pulse.
Seriously, well, he's 400 years in the future, man. We're all like pansexual...
Yeah. Whatever floats your starship.
Yeah, exactly. And then Dax.
Yeah.
Dax was very much a stand-in for transgender. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's even a conversation in the first episode about how you have to like be okay with your uncomfortableness in my new body. That's the road to being comfortable. It was such a progressive statement talking about transgendered people. I imagine now, if anyone on the right side of the spectrum saw that episode, now they're like,
yeah,
you're fucking.
But I can remember conversations around that and articles around the first black captain, and finally, a black guy's in command. And
he was a commander at first. He didn't become a captain until season 3,
which I thought that was a bit of a slap in the face to Sisko. Wasn't
I think it made sense from a story perspective because you're a captain of a starship. You wouldn't be a captain of a space station.
So the Federation has this brand new space station that's theirs now.
Mm.
They've got this planet that's war-torn. They're trying to rebuild and bring into the Federation, so they just send a measly commander out to take control. Like, don't you think that is in itself a little bit of a plot hole? Like, shouldn't that have been a commodore or at least a captain or some sort of ambassador or something?
I think ambassador would make the most sense because, I mean... I don't know if commander's measly. It's like second in command. I mean, but captain,
the mighty Federation.
Like, the second they had the Defiant, Sisko became a captain.
True.
So as soon as he had a ship,
I thought that was kind of weak sauce.
They sent a commander. Yeah. I think it would make more sense if they sent an ambassador for sure.
Yeah.
Or like someone in the diplomatic corps of Starfleet. But I think they probably had the long-term thinking of, well, we start him as a commander, he can be a captain later on. Yeah. And then obviously his relationship. I love the relationship with Picard. Where
he hates them.
He just fucking hates Picard because Picard killed his wife because Picard was turned into a Borg and killed blew up a bunch of Federation starships, and Sisko was on one of them. Yeah. That's how the first episode starts.
Which I thought was great too. Like, we're introduced to Sisko. He's like a broken man. He's lost his wife. He's trying to raise his son. Trying to raise his kid. He gets shipped off to Deep Space Nine in the middle of butt-fuck nowhere in space.
And then he's told, "Hey, you're Jesus."
Yeah.
So he's like, "I think I'll stick around."
Yeah. But I thought that was such a great premise for him, and they just kind of abandoned it after the pilot. It was like, he had all these troubles, and then by the end of the pilot, he's shaking hands with Picard, and he's just good after that.
At the end of the pilot, he literally was like, "Hey, so some aliens just told me I'm Jesus, so I'm sticking around now."
He's the Bajoran chosen one.
But I love that too. Like, I guess people don't understand that there's like steps to progress. Like there was a time when you couldn't even acknowledge gay people existed on TV, and then on TV you had to make, they could exist, but you had to make fun of them.
Yeah.
And then they couldn't be a main character, and so people look back and go, "Oh, it was so homophobic and regressive," and it's like, well, no, that's the steps that are taken in a society. And when you look at it over the few amount of years, like 50 years is a blink of an eye. And so in the 1993, you couldn't have a transgendered person on a show. Mm-hmm. Networks didn't even want to admit they existed. So the Star Trek's way around that was Dax, was to say there's a slug in her stomach and she used to be a man.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really great. That was a sci-fi smart way of fitting in a social concept that wasn't allowed on TV at the time.
Which Star Trek's really known for, right?
Really known for.
I mean, there was the classic half black face, half white face.
Well, he's white on the right side.
Frank Gorshin episode from the original series, which just slapped racism literally in the face.
I always forget that was the Riddler.
Yeah.
I always forget it was Frank Gorshin who did that.
But yeah, I mean, Star Trek's known for that little barrier nudge and slap in the face.
But how they always
doing it in a very roundabout way.
They always use... They always have to use sci-fi elements to talk about what's going on in everyday life because traditionally network television doesn't allow that shit on TV. That's why it's interesting, like 21st century Star Trek. It's more important than ever, but also in some ways less relevant than ever.
Well, and it's such schlock now. I mean, by the time Voyager came along, it was awful, and
it was dead.
What they've done with Discovery is...
they need to let Star Trek die.
For another 20, 30 years.
Because we have 177 episodes for 3 series. Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Star Trek all had almost 200 episodes.
Yeah.
79 original series episodes, almost 100 Enterprise episodes.
11 or 12, 13 movies are we up to now?
Right, so that's 800, 900 hours of Star Trek. If that's not enough for you, if you're still like, no, I want more Star Trek!
And fucking Patrick Stewart's coming back now.
I actually tweeted him. I got I get my Twitter I use maybe once a year. And I tweeted him being like,
just
every
when
once
Discovery
in a while,
came out, when Patrick Stewart goes back.
every once in a while, I'm like, I just want to say something because I hate the world being reduced to Twitter. I hate just people screaming at each other, but then nothing changes. So I try to avoid it. But every once in a while, it gets the better of me, and I kind of break down. Like literally today, I tweeted at Stephen Harper's ex lawyer. Because he was going on, he was trying to discredit the media Trump style, and I called him out on it. And I actually put it on my Facebook. He sent me a message back being like, "You were such a fucking idiot, Chris. You don't understand that your like left wing bullshit is going to destroy the world." It was like really hilarious. But I actually tweeted at Patrick Stewart being like, "Please don't let them turn Picard into a broken man in a violent world." Because the whole point of Star Trek is that what we're going through right now pays off.
Yeah.
And so even if you present us something like Discovery, where it starts vicious and violent, but by the final episode it's better, still implies that it starts vicious and violent, which means that we didn't succeed.
We digress.
Yeah.
De-evolve?
De-evolve? We
Digress was not the word.
We fuck up.
Yeah, it goes wrong. It's going to get worse before it gets better.
And that destroys the entire concept of Star Trek for me. Like the whole point is to feel like you're in a world that is better than ours, where people don't have the same petty bullshit anymore. Mm-hmm. And if you want to explore that petty bullshit, you use aliens for it. But I digress. We're getting off of Deep Space Nine and a little more onto Star Trek in general. So yeah, there's a lot of religious undertones to it.
Yeah.
Sure. I love the idea that it had the two sides of the religion, that the Bajorans literally believed they were gods, but then Starfleet was like, no, man, we know this guy named Q. Like,
he's an actual guy?
who's not even, like, they're just aliens. But then Sisko kind of buys into the fact, that I always found odd, that they kind of steered Sisko towards buying into them as gods, when they knew they were just, like, multi-dimensional, fourth-dimensional entities. They've encountered these things before. Mm-hmm. They've had adventures with these types of aliens before. It was weird that by season 7, Sisko was straight up referring to them as actual gods. I thought was a little odd.
As the prophets.
Yeah,
because they did clear up their backstory and come right out and I don't know.
Because I mean,
and they existed in the wormhole too, didn't they?
Yeah,
wasn't that part of the tie-in?
And it was great when the Bajorans believed they were gods, but again, like the better tomorrow for us as a scientific world, we're like, no, we know these things are just fourth dimensional beings that exist backwards and forwards in time and can influence us, give us visions and stuff. But we saw that scientifically, so it was weird when that kind of cross-contaminated. So it wasn't just the Bajorans believing in it anymore. Starfleet started believing it, and I thought it was a little odd. And there was a little too much warmonger. What was the colonel's name? The chubby colonel who had the belt that made him look like he was wearing a little dress because he had a big belly, but he had the longer uniform, so it was always flapping. The guy that was like the main colonel for the war with the Dominion. Had a very militaristic haircut. He was
Admiral?
The Admiral.
The Federation
Sorry,
guy?
not Colonel. The
I
Admiral.
think I know who you're talking about. I don't know his name.
Him, Sisko, and Gowron.
Yeah, the dark hair.
Yeah. In the final episode when they take Cardassia, they're on Cardassia, and Gowron's drinking the blood wine, and they pour their cups out. He was a little too, because he got into like the Section 31 territory. Mm-hmm. He was a little too militaristic. There were times where I was like, ooh, I get that you're bored as writers because you've written hundreds of episodes.
Well, was Ronald D. Moore still on at that point?
I think he was on all the way to the end,
Did he go right to the end?
Because he was always frustrated with Deep Space Nine.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, he did some awesome work, but I kind of thought that he had left, and that's what the reason for some of their weaker episodes was. But if we went to the end,
that's something we should have known going into a podcast.
We should probably Google that and edit this out,
and then come back
and say Ronald D. Moore did the whole series.
He did the whole thing. No, just if anyone wants to comment and let us know, we'll do
Ronald D. Moore, perhaps if you're out there doing the podcast.
We'll do a little. I contacted the girl who plays Ezri Dax to do a cameo on this.
Sweet hot Ezri Dax.
Well, now she's definitely not going to. She's going to hear that.
Sweet hot Ezri Dax.
But she did not get back to us about being on the podcast.
Yeah, that was a pleasant change for me when we got
Ezri?
Jadzia and Ezri came on.
I was never a big fan of Jadzia.
I was just like the Doctor. I turned into a cartoon character from the 40s with my tongue on the floor.
Yeah. That was Bruce McCullough's girlfriend, I believe.
Really?
Yeah, she was on A Bunch of Kids in the Hall. I would just from a character perspective, I was never really like Jadzia Dax because I think Terry Farrell wasn't a great actress.
And
flat is in terms of her acting.
Yeah, like she was just stone. Like,
but
nothing was ever a high or a low, and they did some weird episodes with her.
And she went on to do... She quit Deep Space Nine to go on and be on the Ted Danson show, Becker. And then
she had that going.
That was canceled after, 1-2 seasons. Yeah. So she fucked up. At least it was serendipitous that the one actor who decided to bail on the series was the one character who could logically be brought back. Because she was a symbiotic species with a slug in her belly that could just
be
go
reborn in anybody.
To another actor. So I guess at the end of the day, that was lucky for them. True. But, did you know, I think you did know, we've discussed before that the original villain was supposed to be the Borg. It was supposed to be a wormhole to the Delta Quadrant.
Yeah.
And then Paramount came in and said, no, we got big plans for the Borg, and made first contact, and that was it. And then Voyager used the Borg.
Yeah.
So they were really pissed about that.
Yeah.
Because they were like, why is Voyager going to use the Borg? Because the Voyager drove the Borg into the ground. Like, they ruined the Borg.
Well, Voyager drove a lot of stuff into the ground.
It did. They drove Q into the ground. They drove the Borg into the ground.
Barclay.
The Borg went from being like an exploration of humans' uncomfortable relationship with technology to just zombies, and that was really disappointing to me. That it's like,
well, in this blood feud between the Queen and Janeway, always trying to one up each other.
The whole idea of a queen. I mean, the older I get, the less I like First Contact. When it first came out, I was like, "Ooh, neat Borg action movie," but now as like an adult, I kind of look at it and go, "You fucked the Borg up. You gave them a queen, you made them zombies." You remember when being assimilated was like a horrifying body, like, horror process? Now they just shoot tubes into your neck like a zombie biting you, and you go, blah, 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 and you're a Borg.
And you're a Borg already.
So that was lame. Like, at the times, again, that movie came out when I was like 13, 14, so I was like, oh, yay, fucking yes! But now I look at it and go, yeah, but...
Well, and they used to be so creepy because they showed no emotion at all.
Right.
And then they started to get mean the later they go on. I remember the Borg babies in the drawers. Like,
that was
they just kept them in drawers.
I like that idea because that's the first time we saw the Borg, they found babies in drawers. And that was creepy because you didn't know if they just found a baby and it was waiting to be assimilated, or
if they have Borg
they
babies.
had Borg babies. You don't know. You don't know if the Borg are the technology or the people. Or the fusion of the two, or if one's manipulating the other. You didn't know. And that it's sort of like the space jockey in Alien, where the mystery was what made it interesting.
Yeah.
But now you know they're just like, oh, they're bees with a queen, and
well, then they're zombies that get angry, and
they have a dream world that they live in. Oh. Remember that monstrosity?
I thought we said we weren't going to talk about Voyager
yes.
or Discovery.
Well, actually, one last point I'll make about Discovery is I thought of a great example of an argument against Star Trek Discovery, and also an argument against... Well, no, I think it's an overall... Because people really defend the J.J. Abrams movies, Star Trek Beyond, Star Trek Into Darkness, and the Star Trek, and Discovery as being like, no, it's a new take on Trek. First of all, it's the laziest, safest thing. It's not. They're not trying anything
Wars
new.
The Enterprise.
Right. So everyone keeps saying, "Oh, at least they're trying something new." It's like, no, they're not. They're making Breaking Bad with Star Trek. That's the safest you could play it.
Yeah.
But secondly, it would be like if they rebooted the X-Files, and the X-Files now stood for ex-Soviet spies that Mulder and Scully hunted down, and there was no aliens, no government conspiracy, no creatures of the week. So the core of what makes the X-Files was shoved aside. They used the X-Files because of brand recognition and intellectual property and names, and then made it something completely different. And people are going, what a bold new approach. And it's like, why not just let it die or do what it's supposed to be? That's sort of how I see New Trek, where it's like, you've just taken the aliens and the government out of the X-Files.
Yeah.
Why are you making the X-Files?
And then they even didn't do that right.
So Deep Space Nine.
So, a couple things.
Yeah.
I love the slow burn up to the Dominion.
I love that they caused the infighting.
Sprinkling little things about, like there were, I forget, the Grand Nagus came and he was, like, going to trade Tulaberry wine with some crazy alien species, and they were like, we need to consult with the Dominion, and that's all you heard for, 3 or 4 episodes, and they started doing more and more, and you find out that the Dominion rule the Gamma Quadrant.
They're the big empire, the Gamma Quadrant. And I love that the Dominion stirs the bee's nest of the Alpha Quadrant, too. Before they invade, they sneak in and get us to all fight ourselves. Yeah. They disrupt us.
They come in with the
classic military action. Yeah, they get weaken your side before you actually officially invade them.
So yeah, and I love the fact that Deep Space Nine was a continuation of several episodes, because Star Trek had never done that before either.
Yeah, they had a lot of standalone, but about 1/3 of each season was one big story.
Yeah,
and that was great.
Which was great.
It was really good.
Couple things that I always, and I'm a detail guy, and I'm also an engineer. So
well, you're an engineer. God help us, we're in the hands of engineers.
We love to change things.
Yeah.
So O'Brien comes the chief engineer, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Why does he lose his lieutenant rank that he dutifully earned on the Enterprise
was
as a
odd.
transporter chief?
Yeah.
They rip that off and give him some weird,
He's just
funky
chief.
symbol, and he's just a chief.
And they make out as if he's an enlisted man,
Yeah,
too.
like he's not really a Federation.
And they never really explain. Does Memory Alpha talk about? Was that in a book somewhere that he was like it was an honorary title for the Enterprise or some shit? Or
maybe, but that's weak too.
But they just changed it to make him the chief of operations or chief of
for something different. I always thought that was kind of lame.
It is odd. It's a loophole.
The other one, the Defiant,
Mm-hmm.
because the Defiant was a starship in the original series as well. It always bugged me that the Defiant wasn't a -A or something when it came in for Deep Space Nine.
Wasn't it? Yeah.
So that I was like, but why
guess-
does the Enterprise get letters but not the Defiant?
Maybe if we're going down that rabbit hole, maybe you need the same registry number, and since the Defiant was an NX,
Maybe. But then they lost the Defiant, and then the new Defiant came, and it still wasn't a -A.
you know what I think that was? Budget. They're like, we already have 150.
We still have the model, and we'll just paint the -A.
We already have 150 shots of this thing. We we needed to shoot 10 more for the finale, and then every other flyby.
Because they lost it with like 5 episodes left and got another one back.
Because I remember that bothered the shit out of me too. Because I think anyone who's really into Star Trek is a details guy, and that bugged the shit out of me too. That when the Defiant was blown up, the new one wasn't an NCC; it was still an NX. So why is it still a new prototype ship? And that there wasn't
the exact same,
right? And there wasn't any kind of A or anything. Because what was it? It was the USS.
They did say it was a something.
Sao Paul or something.
Yeah,
something like that. Like how the original Enterprise, the A was the USS something or other.
It was at the Yorktown.
The Yorktown, and then they just slapped an A on it, and they gave. Yeah. I love that theory that was punishment for Kirk because the A was such a piece of garbage. Because as soon as he gets it, it's just falling apart. It's not finished. Yeah. So it was a bit of like we could give you the new flagship, but we're still kind of punishing you.
So it'll be in shambles when you get it.
It's gonna be in a bit of shambles. What else you got there?
So favorite episodes.
Okay.
For me. Probably the top one's got to be the Tribble flashback where they intermingle with the original
Trials
cast.
and Tribulations.
Trials and Tribulations. Such an amazing episode.
Yeah.
Kirk talking to the crew. I mean, them in the original story.
It was really good too
awesome.
for a TV budget. How they were able to incorporate them into that original episode. So in case you haven't seen it, it's the episode "The Trouble with Tribbles."
Somebody goes back in time, and
it's one of the Klingons. One of the Klingons, they put a bomb in a Tribble. He goes back in time to the episode "Trouble with Tribbles" because he's the Klingon who was outed by Kirk in that episode, and he went back in time to put a bomb in a Tribble to blow up Kirk, and the Defiant follows them back. The first mention of the Enterprise E. Do you remember that? Because they go. It was the Enterprise. And they go, which Enterprise? There have been 5, and the guy goes 6. And all of his fans were like, ooh! First mention of a new Enterprise!
What they really meant was the NX-01 that we've never mentioned before up until Enterprise. I love the fact that in that episode, too, they explained why the Tribbles fall so haphazardly
because they're just
on Kirk
chucking them
at the
out.
end. Because at the end, they're throwing the ones that aren't bombs.
Yeah, it's
Which was an amazing tie-in.
Cisco and Dax are in the Tribble room just chucking Tribbles out while they're scanning them, trying to find a bomb. And so that's where the one's bonking Kirk on the head. Yeah, it was pretty adorable. I don't know if I think because the last 6 or 7 episodes are one big episode.
Yeah, the end of the Dominion War.
The end of the Dominion War. I think I love too the drug addicted soldiers, the Jem'Hadar,
the Ketracel White.
The Ketracel White. Those were really great. But I think that whole last run, is probably my favorite episode. I would count those 6 episodes as one.
The finale,
just the whole lead into it. The Cisco being warned that being with Cassidy Yates will bring him great suffering and that whole business. But
I enjoyed the war too. I mean, for me, it was cool seeing the Cold War side in the Next Generation, where they're always running into the Romulans or the Borg or whatever.
Right.
But
the hot war,
the huge scale war, like seeing an armada of Starfleet and the might behind the military. How did Chris Pine put it, or Captain Pine put it? The peacekeeping armada.
Oh,
but to see them actually come to fruition.
You know what Starfleet is, don't you? It's a peacekeeping and military. Nice.
It's a militaristic peacekeeping armada.
Kaboom!
Star Wars in space.
J.J. Abrams, go fuck yourself. No offense, but dude, just you fucked up Star Trek.
It was an eloquent way to describe it. But anyways, I love seeing the huge,
but not entirely accurate. But yeah, sorry.
No, of course not. But like you look over and there's an Excelsior ship, an Ambassador, a Galaxy, and they're all flying into the wormhole, which is pretty cool.
Wasn't that the first major act of the Dominion? Was they suicide bombed a Galaxy class ship?
Yeah,
and that was like, holy fuck, what are we up against right now?
Which was pretty cool.
And you know what always bugged me about those big battle scenes though? Why wasn't it just the Star Drive section?
Yeah, they actually brought the whole Galaxy ship in.
Because again, for anyone listening who doesn't know,
that was the whole premise.
The whole
of the Galaxy
concept
ship.
was the Galaxy class ship would separate its saucer section and the Star Drive section would go into battle.
Keep the families somewhere safe.
And it's not like they didn't have those models to work with, so you think it would have even been cheaper and easier for them to have just used the Star Drive section. So it just seems
plot hole.
Just an odd oversight to not have. And how cool it would have been to have seen all these nubby little Star Drive sections going into space. Yeah. That would have been fun. Well, what's your next point?
Okay, so my next favorite episodes, Cisco breaking the Prime Directive to bring the Romulans into the war. I thought that was an awesome episode.
Which again ties into the whole, what does Roddenberry's future do when faced with unyielding evil?
Exactly. So yeah, he had the internal struggle of whether or not to deceive the Romulans and bring them in with the... I forget what it was. Like
it's a fake! It's a fake!
No, it was like 2 episodes before. Garrick was on the Cardassian tailor Garrick was on a mission with them, and he had someone killed and planted a encoded message on their body in an explosion that said that a species was going to align with the Dominion that the Cardassians didn't like. It was something like that. It was just a fake document to make the Romulans believe they had to join the Federation.
Yeah.
How did that resolve itself, too, when he was like, it's a fake!
It's a fake!
So he comes in screaming that, but eventually they believe it is real.
Oh, they think it is?
Something else happens, and then they do join the war, but it was a fake.
Yeah, but it was a fake.
But yeah, I remember that. The crazy Romulan ambassador just screaming at poor Cisco.
That's become a meme. Yeah.
It's a fake! It's a fake!
It's all over the place. If you're a nerd.
Mm-hmm. And then the other one I think we got to mention is the Cisco back in, like, what was it, 30s or 40s New York, writing sci-fi. He was writing Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
And they were persecuting him because he had the black commander of the starship.
Yeah, it was a commentary on those pulp magazines in the 1920s and 30s about how women and anyone who wasn't white would have to go under pseudonyms. And if anyone ever came in to interview them, they'd have to have a white guy go out and pretend to be them. Mm-hmm. And Cisco just was not happy with that. It was a great episode. It was such an amazing exploration of race relations, especially when you're dealing with a character who is, in that time, would not be allowed to be
absolutely
the person he is. And I love that the villains were the fucking cops beating the shit out of him for being black. I love the excessive use of the N-word throughout it. Yeah. I love Michael Dorn was like the baseball player guy who was all famous, and then
trying to pick up Cisco's girlfriend.
Yep, and then Jake, his son, was like the grifter guy.
Yep, the druggie.
That was a really good episode. Yeah, that was really, really good. And then at the end, he's not sure. Like, I love the ambiguous ending of which is real, Deep Space Nine or the
guy writing the Deep
Space Nine show. So have we been this whole time watching a show about a guy in the 20s or 30s writing a sci-fi show? That was really, really good. That was an amazing one. Yeah, those are good picks.
Yeah, those are my top ones. I love remember the Federation security guard that went rogue and joined the Maquis?
Oh, fuck, what was his name?
I can't think
Cisco
of it.
was always yapping at him.
Yeah.
What was his name? I keep thinking Daniels, but that's the guy from Enterprise.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do remember. And Cisco, that episode I remember even as a kid, I was like, okay, what the fuck? Because remember Cisco nuked a planet?
Yeah.
Just to piss him off?
Yeah,
it's like,
to try and catch him.
Star Wars Empire shit, man.
Yep.
Cisco was a badass.
Yeah. A bunch of Maquis were hiding on a planet, and he fucked it over and had to rescue them just because he was trying to catch him. Was it Levesque? Or he called Cisco Levesque?
No, Levesque, I feel like Levesque was a Cardassian. I know that name is in there. But I like that they really unsuccessfully tried to recreate that with Archer in Enterprise, too, by having him go slowly evil. Because he had to say he was the one and only thing standing between
the Xindi
and destroying Earth. So they had him go a little nutty too.
Yeah.
But Deep Space Nine handled it with a little more eloquence, a little more grace. They earned it. Mm-hmm. Like, unlike, say, like STD, Discovery, they were just evil from day one. You're like, oh, fuck you.
They were just bastards.
They were just monsters.
We are going to kill this creature to go to warp drive.
Do you remember the episode where they got put into that game? It was like the tricksters of fuck or whatever.
Yeah.
They were having like sing that like 1, 2, buckle my shoe.
Yeah. What was it? Oh, I would have had it if you hadn't just said 1, 2, buckle my shoe.
That god awful song they had to sing.
Yeah.
And they had like 80s porn star stashes, the aliens.
Yeah.
That came through from the Gamma Quadrant. They were just gamers. They
Shep
just
3. That was
was that their planet?
The levels were Shep.
Oh, Shep. That was so ridiculous. And then it all was for nothing. It was all. I love the idea that it was so much like horror of like.
Well, they were dying, right?
But then they just wake up.
Yeah.
So because it was a game.
Yeah.
Like I like from right off the bat. They say it's a game, but then they trick you as an audience into. I mean, it's a horrible episode. But I do like that you think they're in real peril, and at the end, the whole thing is like it was a game, dudes. What the fuck?
Yeah.
It was just a game. Odo was great.
Odo was awesome. I loved the tailor. Fuck, what was his name? Garrick the tailor was an amazing character.
Who was he was a spy with the
was like a triple spy. You never knew if he was with the Cardassians, with the Federation.
He was like the dude from Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
What are you, a triple agent?
You're 1, 2, 3 agent. I'm CIA. You bloody idiot. Fuck that movie too.
I liked how Jake wasn't as annoying as Wesley was. He still had the kid ringing around.
Jake was awesome. I love that Jake became a writer.
Yeah.
I like that I loved how many people weren't in Starfleet. Mm-hmm. That really was... Because, I mean, we already had 7 seasons... Well, we didn't at that point, but ultimately 7 seasons of Next Generation of Starfleet officers being Starfleet officers. So I love that Deep Space Nine was about the civilians. And again, to go back to Garrick, so he was a quadruple agent guy who was... What was the Cardassian secret service called? What were they? Their MI6. The Cardassian...
You really should have written this stuff down.
I swear we know what we're talking about. It was the Cardassian something order, or...
yeah, it was.
The Zibbity-Doo...
Zibbity-Doo
order. Zibbity-Doo order. Anyways,
we should probably pause this, Google it, edit it in the right name.
It'll just be
Obsidian.
Obsidian order.
Obsidian order.
Yes, and so that was Section 31 of Cardassia. Right. And Section 31, again, was...
Which came out in Deep Space Nine also, which was awesome.
The idea that Starfleet had this clandestine organization that was just ultimately...
Protecting from within.
But ultimately breaking the rules of Starfleet, which again, like, I get why a lot of hardcore Trek fans at the time were like, fuck this show. Because it was exploring aspects of Starfleet that Discovery went on to explore. Like the idea of a Section 31 is pretty messed up in Roddenberry's future.
It is, but I mean, you have to admit, as a writer, it's tough not to have any conflict or any,
I think it's tough,
challenges.
but I think that's a challenge, right? As a writer, the limitations is.
Well, that's the thing. You can only go to the alien species so many times, right?
Which is exactly why they shouldn't have had 3 Star Trek series running.
Well, yeah,
all at once. It's like, yo, guys, you kind of messed up. So, what do you think of this? What do you think this New Picard series is going to be?
I don't know. I'm not interested. Like, it is so...
Because it's the same dude. It's the...
Bleach washed out now.
It's like, the hack who makes Discovery,
How much money must they have given Patrick Stewart to come back to Star Trek?
But what's his name? The guy who's making these series is the dude who wrote Star Trek and Star Trek Into Darkness, who made the Mummy movie.
Robert Orci?
No, the other guy. The one who wasn't a Star Trek fan.
He's chummy.
And he made the Mummy Interconnected Universe, that Tom Cruise Mummy movie. It was his like directorial debut.
Which
he's a total
flop.
I think he's a total hack, but I think the idea is that no one wants to take... It's like making video games out of movies. It's like no self-respecting game designer wants to do someone else's thing.
Yeah.
So Star Trek's at a point now where no one wants to touch it. So they're just going to give it to the biggest person they can find, and the guy who's just been, like, Universal just went, we're never working with you again. Thanks for bankrupting our dark universe.
We'll give you a good reference to Paramount, though.
Right. So they got him in... Brian Fuller, I think. I could be wrong on that. But, so yeah, he's going to make it just a violent world. He's going to make
it's going to be so terrible.
But what do you think it's going to be, though? Like, aside from its quality, what do you think it's going to be?
I mean, based on Patrick Stewart not looking like a 60-year-old man anymore, he looks like an 80-year-old man.
Which is what
like,
it
it's
is.
got to be him on the E or F, whatever he's going to be on.
I'm thinking he's going to be not in Starfleet anymore. I'm thinking he's going to be called back in to Starfleet. I think he's going to be an old man on his vineyard the way we saw him in All Good Things.
Yeah.
I think they're going to bring him back. Maybe he's going to have his Irmotic syndrome. He's going to be all fucked up or something.
Possibly.
Might be interesting. Because they
Whatever
released,
they do, it's going to be garbage.
the title
It's gonna
leaked.
suck.
The title leaked. It's Star Trek. Fuck again.
Retirement home.
No, it starts with a D. That's why I thought it's another STD series. It's Star Trek Discovery, now Star Trek
Dementia.
Star Trek
Or it's
Dementia.
Dementia.
I think it's Star Trek Dementia. It's Star Trek Discipline. What the fuck is it? That's gonna bug me now. Google it. Anyone
No,
listening?
don't Google it. Bing it. You'll have far better luck if you Bing it.
What are you, not Tobey Maguire, the second Spider-Man? He was using Bing.
Andrew Garfield?
Andrew Garfield was binging it up in the Amazing Spider-Man.
And that's why he is not Spider-Man anymore.
So what's your Star Trek series? If Paramount came to you right now and said, Matt Morrissey...
I would say none. I would say I will pay you to not make any more Star Trek.
Here's $100 million. What do you got? What do you got?
It's got to be something different. I would probably go back. I would go back to. I hate to say it, but I'd maybe do an Enterprise. I would either do the Enterprise B.
You're gonna do like a
I would
prequel.
go in the middle, maybe, because
Okay.
we've done the early Federation. We've done Enterprise, which is like the birth of the Federation.
Mm-hmm.
Star Trek Discovery is doing whatever the fuck they're doing. We've done the original series. We've flashed forward 100 years to the next gen. We've gone and
Next
done
Gen Deep Space Time Voyage.
all
The
that
last
crap.
thing we've seen in contemporary timeline was Star Trek Nemesis. Nothing's happened
Right.
post Nemesis.
Yeah.
Everything's been prequels.
I mean, you could go zip into the future, but that's just going to be more of the same crap with different aliens, another Borg, whatever. I think something a little more tied down into the mythos would be better for me. That's where I would go, but it would still be garbage. And I just love those red uniforms. So
The old ones. Yeah. All right, hear me out on this. This is my Star Trek series. I've had this in my head for years. This is my... If someone came and said, what's your fucking idea? And I don't have to actually do it. I'm just the idea man.
Right.
My idea is it's 2401.
Okay.
Federation is finally cleaned up from all the years of war with the Borg and the Dominion and all this shit. They finally back on track, but they want to send like a message of like to the Federation, the worlds of the Federation who might not be as interested in being part of the Federation anymore, because it's like every fucking 10 years you guys you
run into the
obliterated.
Sona or the
Something. So in order to kind of restore faith in the Federation, they send out the Enterprise E, which is now the old ass ship, with a whole new crew to go back to doing what Starfleet does best, which is exploring the unknown, which is a basic concept. But the way I'd approach it is that I would make every single episode I'd give to someone else. So I just find 10 science fiction writers and go, write your Star Trek episode. The idea is it's 2401, they're on board the Enterprise E.
standalone
Episodes again, but the same crew on the E on a mission of exploration. No overarching story. You can watch them in any order. And so it's like, Neil Gaiman, what's your Star Trek story? Boom, do it.
Yeah.
Bring in like J.J. Abrams. You want to do an episode? Boom, do it. But the only constraint is, here are the 7 characters, here's the ship, here's the time period, go. And I think that's the last thing that could possibly squeeze any originality out of it, because it would just be sort of
people's own little stories and their vision
of what Starfleet is.
It wouldn't always look like those same shots that they just did over and over again.
And I guess the stipulation would be, you can't suddenly make it like a violent world or anything. The idea is that we are in a peaceful future.
Directive.
If all the people get along, we want people it's like the Orwell is the best Star Trek right now is the Orwell, because it's actually a crew that likes each other, that gets along, that the ship feels like a home. That's part of Star Trek.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. It's like, make them all like each other, make them get along, and have fun. And I think that would be I think the only way to really save it right now.
Yeah. Well, and that's always been the best part of Star Trek, right? It's learning about the characters. What are they all about? The little development and
right.
the backstory is the exciting parts. But that's what people go back to Star Trek for, right? Is
right.
the characters and
I think it really is like that, the psychology of the feeling of home. Like, you feel comfortable in Star Trek.
Yeah.
Like, you feel like these are people you want around. They're not people... Like, that's the problem with Discovery, is it's a dog-eat-dog world where the meanest dog always wins. Mm-hmm. And so just in the last episode, if you're like, no, but we're actually really good, he was from a mirror universe, fuck you, it doesn't count. They're still dog-eat-dog, vicious fucking characters. that doesn't make you don't want.
That would have turned out. I didn't watch.
That's the thing. Lorca there, the dude, he ended up being from the mirror universe. That was their way of writing them out of the complaints that this was an evil, vicious world. But
it's just him.
It was him and a couple other people, I think. But then the idea was, I didn't watch it either. I just read about it. But it doesn't work though when the Federation itself is still sending prisoners to mining colonies to be worked to death. It doesn't work when one guy is from the mirror universe. And so apparently that is canon, because there's an episode of Discovery where there's a lot of Klingon nudity in the shows. You get to see a naked Klingon girl fucking a dude, so you get to see Klingon boobs, and then a dude's peeing. At one point, a Klingon's taking a piss in an alley, and you see 2 streams coming out.
Really?
Apparently it is canon that Klingons have 2 of everything. That's been established. I don't know if maybe it was like a tongue-in-cheek joke, like Dax was like, Klingons have 2 of everything. My asshole sure is sore or something. But apparently that's canon, and so the Klingons were peeing 2 streams of blood. Jesus. I was thinking...
It was a rough episode.
Yeah, STD, Star Trek Discovery. But that does make me wonder about poor Counselor Troy and Jadzia Dax, and even that one night with Ezri.
Just walking bow-legged.
But are the dicks next to each other, like horizontally, or are they vertically? Because vertically might...
We'll never know. Vertically could work in your favor.
Horizontally...
And are they all ridged? And,
I don't know. Do they have the same nose ridges that their faces
looks like
have?
A dagger.
Oh, actually, I think the still frame for this podcast just needs to be a Klingon dick. It's gonna be what it is.
Many ribs.
I really love too when they go to Vix. When they
Vix was great.
It's such a bizarre show to explain this to somebody who's never seen Deep Space Nine before. It's like, okay, so
they're in a bar.
They're in a bar, but in the bar is a
bar
holosuite. Yeah, that's set in the 1960s, and there's a lounge lizard singer there that sings them Sinatra songs.
Yep.
Out of the tree of life, I just picked me a plum.
You came along and everything started to hum.
Still, it's a real good bet. The best is yet to come.
The best is yet to come, and babe, won't it be fine?
Who kind of is sort of his own personality.
Well, that's the thing,
He's
too.
More than a computer, anyways.
It is odd they never explored that, because they explored the idea that holograms could achieve consciousness in the Next Generation episode with Moriarty. Mm-hmm. So Data, so again, for anyone who doesn't know, they programmed the computer to create an opponent who could defeat Data while they were playing Sherlock Holmes in the holodeck, created Professor Moriarty, and boom, he had self-awareness. And so they dealt with that in the show. But then in Deep Space Nine, their holograms seem to regularly have self-awareness. Never really touched on it.
Yeah.
They were just like, it's our slave race.
Oh, well, I thought they did touch on that a little bit. Like, Vic had some sort of consciousness. Because didn't they say they left his program running even when anybody wasn't
Continuously.
in there?
But they never touched on his rights. Does Vic have the right to... Because they did with the Doctor a little in Voyager, of his rights, of the rights of holographic people. So they kind of explored it in Voyager. But in Deep Space Nine, they were just like, yeah, shut the fuck up and get back to the holodeck.
Yeah.
Go serve us drinks, you fucking douchebag. Like, they didn't touch on it at all. And I love, too, that it was a holosuite.
Yeah, it was never a holodeck.
Because you remember in the first few episodes, because the holodeck, because the Enterprise D was the first one who got an advanced holodeck. They were the only ship for a while that had an advanced holodeck. But it was just recreation area for the crew. In Deep Space Nine, they made no qualms about the fact that it was for fucking.
Yeah.
That there's so many episodes in the first season of people getting massaged by girls in bikinis on the holodeck and being murdered or whatever. Mm-hmm. That's why it was a holosuite, because it's where you went to fuck. And you remember
could hose it down afterwards.
Right. And you remember Quark would make holographic representations of the women, because he made one of Kira for a high buyer. Yeah. That was ridiculous.
But also great.
Also great. Quark was great too. He was a great exploration of sexism and greed.
Mm-hmm.
Which
but
again,
with the heart of gold.
With the heart of gold.
Along with it.
Well, that's great too, because like Star Trek, they may have been this hot war series with all this violence and insanity, but every alien race at one point or another realized the ideals of the Federation were actually pretty good. Mm-hmm. Even his Quark's brother Rom became Negus, and women had rights, and everything was rolled back on terms of...
And they could wear clothes.
And they could wear clothes. So I do like that element where everyone kind of learned, this is actually pretty good. It's not like some.
Yeah.
It's not like some.
Well, Deep Space Nine was really the last good Trek. I mean, let's be honest with yourselves,
Oh, for
right?
sure.
I mean, Voyager was garbage. The
Enterprise
movies had their moments, but on the whole, certainly not up to par.
No, I don't like, honestly, the older I get, the less I like the Next Generation movies, and I've never liked the J.J. Abrams movies. Like, the first one, again, is fun as a space action film.
Yeah.
If it was an issue of space action heroes, that would be
awesome.
Great, and much better than what we actually make. But that was a self-burn. Yeah, take that, my writing.
It had some sweet little moments, though, right? Like with McCoy meeting Kirk, and all I got left are my bones, and that's how his name. But yeah, on the whole,
it was just Star Wars.
Exactly.
With painted like Star Trek.
Yeah.
And again, like the first one, I think the first one has retroactively gotten crappy for me because I remember, I think I said this to you when the first one came out back in 2009. I was like, that's a fun science fantasy popcorn movie that needed to be that because it was just laying the groundwork for these characters. What's going to determine the quality of the series is the next one.
Which was terrible.
And then the next one was Star Trek Into Reference, where it was just... And I love the idea...
Let's do Khan as a sequel again.
Right. And then revealing Khan, for non-Trek fans, they're like, who is this guy? And then for Trek fans, they're like, this is fucking stupid. So like it appealed to no one. And also Khan Noonien Singh, the Indian tyrant from the 1990s, played by a Mexican in the original series, and then recast as the whitest British guy in the history of Britain. I think there's probably a reason they didn't call him Noonien Singh. They just called him Khan. But even Khan is not exactly a British name.
Yeah.
It was very odd. A very odd casting choice.
Well, Benedict Humperdinck was pretty hot at the time.
Benedict Humperdinck is now his name.
Yes,
going forward. That's amazing. But that's so stupid. Is there they were just like, oh, we don't want Indian actors. Fuck that. We don't even want Mexican actors. They're all rapists, thieves.
Right. We should build a wall.
Yeah, here's some of them are good people.
There are
but
some bad hombres.
They're not in theater. Yeah.
You touched on the Mirror Universe, though, which was also great that Deep Space Nine brought that back.
Yep.
Because Next Gen didn't touch on that at all.
Not at all.
But I felt they went that out well a couple, too many times.
They went out 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, at least.
Because I think when they did it in season 7 and Ezri was there, that's when I was like, oh, come on, guys. I think you've gone here one too. I think the first time was good. The second time was all right. Because the first time was just...
The first time they stumbled into it, it was a transporter accident.
Who was it? Cisco and...
O'Brien?
And O'Brien was Smiley.
Yeah.
He was on the Mirror Universe.
Right. And then the second one, the Mirror Universe, came after them.
To them.
Which was kind of cool.
And then they just kept going back to the Mirror Universe.
Yeah.
Wasn't there one where the Grand Nagus went to the Mirror Universe to try and barter a deal? It was a more comedic one.
Yeah, I think so.
I like that they always would bring in it's like, now I'm going to the Dominion. Now I'm going to the Mirror Universe.
He just led the way into all the dangerous places of the world.
It's ridiculous. But they did a good job with those. I mean, at first.
Yeah.
And then kind of...
Well, like any other, it's got its weak and its good episodes. But yeah, I mean, like I said, when I went back and rewatched it a couple of years ago, yeah, I loved it. It was pure gold.
You know what I love is the makeup on all the aliens in the first season. Odo looks so fucking creepy, and Quark with his big flat nose.
Yeah.
He just looks so weird. They all look so weird. And then
with those terrible freaking black jumpsuits with the color on top.
I always like those jumpsuits.
They just look so bland to me.
I like the idea that starships and space stations had different uniforms.
But then they
ruined
Trek,
that.
they drove that into the ground
because
too.
generations they were wearing them. Yeah. And then I didn't like when they got the First Contact uniforms. The only reason I didn't like it was because people in the jumpsuits, like the Doctor and Dax and O'Brien, wore the jumpsuit version, but then Cisco wore the triple top version where he has
the jacket and the vest,
the red shirt, the vest, and the jacket, and he just looked like a little pumpkin.
Yeah,
You're like, oh,
it was pretty frumpy.
And also, too, they were just using recycled uniforms from First Contact at first, so none of them fit very well. They were all... Cisco's jacket went down... Like, they had to put the badge on the gray shoulder pads.
Yeah,
in the first few episodes.
It was down so far.
Because it didn't fit him at all.
I didn't mind the gray ones, but yeah, I never liked the original DS9 jumpers.
No, I always liked them. That's the one I own. I own the... I mean, I don't own Star Trek.
That would be good.
I actually wore that for Halloween a few years ago. I wear it for Halloween every chance I get.
Does it still fit?
Not now, but a few years ago it did.
Yeah.
And it will again.
And it will. It's coming back.
I'm sweating in this trailer right now. I've already lost 5 pounds. But
we call this the sweat box here at the
seriously.
Morrissey's Dead.
What characters? Who would you put? What's your ranking of the best characters of Deep Space Nine?
Well, Sisko's the greatest. I mean, there's no debate there. I loved Odo. I thought Odo was great.
He had a good arc of being. He didn't know who he was, where he was from, what he was, and then learning that he was a god.
Security officer to
there was so much
of the Dominion.
So much elements of theology in that show because to the Dominion the changelings were gods, to the Bajorans the wormhole aliens were gods.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone had their god in that show. It was very interesting.
Yeah,
I always like Quark.
There wasn't, to be honest, I was never a fan of Jadzia.
No.
I love the Doctor.
Yeah,
I love
Bashir.
The stories he went through. Bashir. We haven't talked about Bashir at all.
No, we haven't.
He was a eugenics baby, right? He
ended
up being a
he
test
was a
tube
con.
genius.
He was a con, and his parents went to prison for it.
Yeah,
because they found out he was they were making a Mach 2 Doctor hologram to replace the Robert Picardo one from Voyager, and the guy came to learn all about the Doctor. Right. And he was testing the hologram when Dr. Bashir's parents walked in and was like, "Oh, son, they're gonna know you're a genetically modified monster."
And he just popped up from behind the box.
It was so adorable too, yeah, because the parents leave sickbay and then like Robert Picardo and Chief O'Brien like step out going, "What, bitch, what?" And it was so hilarious. And they were gonna arrest him, but then the Doctor, then his parents took the blame for it, so they went to prison.
And wasn't that Babu from Seinfeld?
It was
Babu
from Seinfeld,
Babu
yeah.
Bot?
And then his mom was no one that I know.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Bashir had some great adventures, and
he did. He got recruited by Section 31 to do clandestine operations for the Federation. That was always. I got a little bored with Section 31 because I remember it was season 7. They had so many pointless standalone episodes that I was getting annoyed because I knew like the season was wrapping up and I was into the story. So every time they put the story on hold to show like
just put in filler,
like Ezri Dax going back home to deal with her family drama, and you're like, I don't fucking care. I know it's a new character, the first new character you've had in 7 years, but I don't care. And one of them was, I guess, ultimately led to the idea that Section 31 infected the changelings with the disease in order to end the war. But the whole episode where they're going into Sloane's mind.
Oh yeah,
that was a really.
And he was trying to trap them because then they would die.
Then they would die.
Kind of weird.
That was a really lame episode. Morn.
Morn.
Do you remember?
Never said. Did he say one word through the whole series?
Even in the final episode, he's about to say something, and Quark stops him and goes, "Maybe sometimes too much change is a bad thing." Morn's great. I just watched recently because I was watching some episodes to get ready for this podcast, and I watched the episode "Who Mourns for Morn," where Morn quote unquote dies, and then he leaves everything to Quark, and it turns out he was part of a famous heist from years earlier, where he stole 1,000 bricks of latinum. That's where we learned that latinum is a liquid that's stored
in his stomach
in useless gold, in penniless gold or whatever you call it. And then just the ending when Morn burps up,
he spits it in the glass.
Latinum. You're like, whoa! You're like, oh Jesus! I like that line too, where he has the latinum in because he has 2 stomachs, so he had one full of liquid latinum. And just Quark going, no wonder he went bald. Just the idea of this poor alien just...
full of metal,
just suffering his whole life.
The only other metal that's liquid is mercury.
Right.
It can't be good episode.
No. Poor Morn. There's so many characters.
So it was just Jadzia that I didn't really like.
Yeah.
I thought it was kind of lame when Worf came along, too.
They just were wanting to... Because the ratings were never as high.
Yeah, for sure. But, of all the characters to drag
bring
over
Worf.
the...
People forget though,
chief.
Star Trek The Next Generation had Seinfeld numbers. People forget that. They had 20, 30 million, 30 plus million viewers a week. That's fucking bananas. The Star Trek show had Seinfeld numbers, but they weren't on network, so they didn't hit the same rating standards.
Yeah. And I can remember Next Gen coming out new and watching them. I think
Really?
Fox carried it for us. This is back in aerial days. There was no
no
cable or satellite or anything. And it was on... It was Friday nights, I think at 9.
Okay.
Which isn't a great time slot, obviously, but I don't think Fox was the original
I don't remember.
producer of Star Trek anyways.
I don't remember I watched the
But that's what I used to watch it on. It was Channel 29, which was Fox, 9 at night on Friday, and that's what the new episodes were.
Okay. Yeah, see, I only watched the final episode live of Next Gen. I don't remember where Deep Space Nine aired. I think it was City. I think I watched it on
so
City
too.
TV.
Yeah.
But Deep Space Nine only ever got up to like 13, 14 million views, which again in 2018 standards is a mega hit because if you have 5 million views a week, you're considered one of the biggest hits on TV. Like that's how it is. There's so much to watch.
Well, yeah, that's the difference now. Like
there's not as much to watch, but I love the idea that Deep Space Nine got about 18 million viewers. They're like, oh, we're not doing too well. We better bring in a Next Generation character. Who else was there, though? Let's go over some characters.
So
there was Weyoun. Remember Weyoun?
Yeah, Weyoun, who was awesome.
He was the Vorta voice of the Dominion. He was great. And he was a clone.
Yeah.
So he was like Weyoun 6, 7, 8. By the end, they killed the last Weyoun.
Yeah, that was our last Weyoun.
Yeah, that was pretty great.
Gul Dukat was awesome.
Gul
Dukat,
the
protagonist.
He became a Bajoran at the end.
Which was kind of weird, but I love the fact that they killed Vedic, what's-her-face? Vedic Wynn?
Vedic Wynn, yeah. She was... No, it wasn't Vedic Wynn. Who was it? It was... I think you're just thinking of Catherine Wynn.
Oh, yeah, she should have been Vedic Wynn.
It was... I love the idea, too, because there were so much contemporary issues dealt with in Deep Space Nine in the 90s that are super relevant now. Like, I love that the head of the faith of the Bajorans was a self-serving monster who wielded that faith to her own ends and not to the betterment of the Bajoran people.
Yeah.
And they were just... It was a straight-up commentary on the Catholic Church of the 90s, which is now a contemporarily a straight-up commentary, sadly, of religion in the Western world. These are people who wield it. Who was it? She was Vedic... I don't remember. But yeah, she ended up worshipping the Pa-Wraiths, which were the
anti-gods or whatever?
Yeah, they were the devil, basically. They were red energy instead of blue energy. That's how the whole series ends. Because Sisko... I guess we can talk about the finale. What other characters are we missing?
Well, there was all the side ones. So there was the Klingon with the one eye.
Gowron. No, not Gowron.
No,
it was... God damn.
General Martok.
General Martok.
Oh, and by the way, I remembered that stupid little jingle they did in that game was Alamarain, 1, 2, 3, Alamarain, come with me.
That's it. Alamarain, 1, 2, 3, Alamarain, go with me.
Which is almost as catchy as the Deep Space Nine.
Oh, yes, hold on. I want to mention that as we're nearing the end of the podcast, I want to throw in, I found a guy online who decided to put lyrics to Star Trek series, and he did one for Deep Space Nine, but he just did it raw. He did it with no music, just him singing. And I don't want to make...
Wonderfully.
I don't want to make fun of this guy. This guy...
put his heart and soul...
He put himself out there. He put his heart and soul, and he's got like 100,000 views or something, so good for him. But I found it so adorable that I cut together a version and put it on my personal YouTube, laying the music in under. And I just, for you listeners right now, I want you to sit back.
Your listener
at this point. I want you to sit back and just enjoy the next 90 seconds or so of Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
As it was meant to be heard.
As it was meant to be heard, with lyrics.
Deep Space Nine. Deep Space Nine. Not Deep Space Eight. Deep Space Nine. Come on down to the promenade, then go to Quark's and order some root beer, then try to rent a hollow suite with all of your friends on Deep Space Nine. Jadzia Dax and Dodo too. Benjamin Sisko and his son Jay. Then there's Quark, Ram and his son Nog. They're all here on Deep Space Nine. So come on down to the promenade, then go to Quark's and order some prune juice, then try to rent a hollow suite with all of your friends on Deep Space Nine.
So that is amazing.
Try and keep that out of your head when you're going to bed tonight.
It's such an earworm. It just gets stuck in your fucking brain. It's so good. And yeah, who else was there? There was, I guess that's the thing.
Tons
There's
of
so
secondary
many
characters.
Rom,
So there was
Nog.
O'Brien, Rom in the and what was his kid? Nog. Nog joining the Federation was kind of cool with his Federation
Little
ear curtain
or head curtain. Do you remember in the first season, Rom was just a dude, and then he became Rom by about season 3.
Hi, brother.
Yeah, I don't know, brother. And then
I'm a smart engineer.
1, 2, 3, 4, 1. She likes the free, fresh wind in her hair. Life without care. She's broken, but it's okay. Hates California. It's cold and it's damp. That's why the lady. That's why the lady. That's why the lady is a scamp.
And then he got Lita, the Dabo girl.
The hottest girl on Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, and then...
So yeah, there was Quark, Rom, Nog. There was Bashir and O'Brien.
Mm-hmm.
Cisco, Kira. We've hardly mentioned Kira.
Hardly mentioned Kira. She was
an ass-kicking Bajoran.
And she was... I love, too, that they had the ability to play a race that's us. It was just 21st century humans with ridges on our nose. We were... highly volatile. We fought among ourselves, very religious, but to a fault. And again, like I've said this before, I think in other podcasts, where like I'm all for faith. It's religion that I'm against. When someone says, "I know what that fucking feeling is, and I'm going to tell you how to live your life," that's what I'm against. And they explored that concept in Deep Space Nine a lot. Just how the people in charge of telling you what that feeling is, that indescribable feeling, claiming to have ownership of it, are usually fucking evil. And so that was really good. Kira was a great example of that, but Kira did bug me though, because
she lost her faith eventually, didn't she?
No, she was always blind faith.
Really?
And that's what bugged me about her.
I thought she did have some battles with that, because
she had some
hated
battles.
The Vedic. I'm sure it's Vedic Win, isn't it?
I don't honestly.
It's the girl. I'm going to Google the shit out of that.
Google that shit. If anyone wants to comment,
because
on
she
this.
hated her so much.
Yeah, Kai Wynn. You're right. Vedic Win. Kai Wynn. You're right. But do you remember the episode where an artist from like 200 years in the past comes out of the wormhole and claims himself to be the emissary and takes over as emissary and kicks Cisco out? And it really bugged me because in that episode Kira's just like, "Oh, a new emissary," and she's all for it. There's even a conversation with Odo where he's like, "Well, yesterday you believed that Cisco was the emissary and today you believe it's him. What if it's not?" And she's like, if you don't have faith, Odo, you don't understand what it's like to have faith. And it's like, you're not describing faith, you're describing religion. There's a fucking difference. And that always bugged me about Kira. How she was just so blind to the teachings of people who just told her what to think instead of following her own feeling. But she was really interesting. So her backstory was she fought in the Cardassian occupation war, kicked ass, kicked names, took ass. That's a Infinity War reference.
For the 3 people that haven't seen Infinity War.
In case you haven't
Go check that out.
Yeah. Oh, it's a side note of Infinity War. There was a cut line that I really wish that they kept in. It's the scene where Benedict Cumberbatch and Robert Downey Jr. are on the ship after it crashes on Titan, and Star-Lord bursts in and has Spider-Man in a headlock. And he says, I don't remember what the line leading into it was. Oh, it's like, "Oh, you don't serve Thanos?" And he was supposed to go, "No shit, Sherlocks."
Oh, really?
And I was like, that's perfect. Because it's an actual expression. So it wouldn't be like if you didn't know that both
was Sherlock,
both those actors were Sherlock Holmes. It's an actual expression, so it's not like you need to know that.
Yeah.
Like, why did you cut that? That would have been actually brilliant. I mean, it's not even on the nose, because it's an actual expression. But, oh god, we're going to miss so many characters. There's so many.
Well, I think that pretty well covered it, didn't it?
Oh, but there's hundreds of them. Like, what about
like
Damar?
The secondary ones,
Damar, who went on to lead the resistance of Cardassians in an ironic twist that he was now leading resistance with the help of Kira, who had led the resistance, and Garrick was there. The female changeling, which always bugged me, why they looked like Odo.
They chose to look like Odo.
They chose to
with
look
the
like
bad
Odo.
ears and
But Odo
straight data hair.
He just couldn't do his face. That's why he looked like that, because he was born in isolation and never learned how to shapeshift. He had to learn himself. So his face never was quite right. So it was weird that they all looked like that.
And you knew they could turn into perfect humans because they always disguise
themselves as them. So I don't know why they look like Odo. It was very odd, just for the audience. It's sort of the same reason they called it the Gamma Quadrant. You're like, oh, it's for the audience. Oh, it's this interesting aside that has nothing to do with Deep Space Nine, but I wanted to mention. I wrote it down on my little list here. I stumbled across an original making of Star Trek First Contact, where this is a completely random thing that people are going to be checking out while I talk about this, but
including me.
They showed the Enterprise E with its original size, with how it was meant to be, the size it was meant to be, and so they've been fucking it up for years because the measurement of like 600 and whatever, almost 700 meters long, was from the shuttle bay to the nose. But ever since then, they've measured it to the nacelles to the nose, which shrinks it by about 1/3. But on this original, like 1995 or 6 making of whenever the year it came out, they were like, "Oh, it's bigger than the D. Here it is next to it." And from the shuttle bay to the nose, it was just a little bit longer than the D, because the nacelles on the D are at the back of the
forward,
ship.
Yeah.
They're at the very back of the ship. So whoever moved on from there to create the cutaways and the size comparison posters for the fans fucked it up. And they just ran with it. So the actual size of the E, which is obvious when they're walking on the hull of it in First Contact, how massive it looks.
Yeah.
Think of them on the hull of the D when it crashes in Generations, versus them on the hull of the E. It's bigger. So that's crazy. That was the intention. Was that it was 700 meters from shuttle bay to nose?
Because the nacelles go way back.
It's 1/3 the length of the ship.
Yeah.
So it makes the ship
huge,
that much smaller. Yeah. So now it's this tiny little ship next to them. So that's interesting.
And then Abrams made his gigantic Enterprise.
I love the design of that ship, but I hate the size of that ship, the J.J. Abrams Enterprise.
It's gonna be huge.
There's how many? Because there's the original series Enterprise. There's the refit Enterprise. There's J.J. Abrams Enterprise. The J.J. Abrams refit Enterprise. The J.J. Abrams Enterprise A. There's now the Discovery Enterprise. There's like more original Enterprise redesigns than there are Enterprise letters.
Yeah.
It's really...
You got that right.
It's getting really fucking convoluted, man.
Yeah.
Star Trek really needs to die.
Just flush it down the toilet.
Yeah. So, okay, I think this is a good thing to go out on. So the finale, Sisko dies. Kind of.
Well, yeah, he goes to the wormhole people.
His body is destroyed, but his soul or whatever goes to... Because he's half... wormhole alien. He had revealed that his
spoiler alert.
Yeah, his mother was a wormhole alien, a prophet, and that's why he's the emissary. What would be your season 8, or even a movie? How would you wrap that shit up?
I don't know if you can... Well, geez, that's tough, because Deep Space Nine was a true finale. I mean, Next Gen, you could have done 10 more seasons after their finale. They were just...
They wrapped up that story, but I mean, all those characters are still there. O'Brien moved back to Earth.
Right. So Bashir stayed on the station.
He stayed on the station because he was dating Ezri at that point.
Kira stayed on the station?
Yeah, she was the new commander.
So Odo goes home to
Kira joined Starfleet.
the Great Collective.
Yep. Jake's still on the station.
Right.
Sisko's wife
Quark's
is pregnant with their daughter.
Yeah.
So that would be a great character to pick up a new show on.
Be a quarter wormhole
alien, and she's going to be
I like
about
wormhole.
She would be again this year. She'd be 25, so that would be perfect to have the show set around this character of Sisko's daughter.
I don't know. I've never thought of it. I don't have anything in the chamber that I would bring in for Deep Space Nine.
I think I would just really want to set it around his daughter. I think honestly, the only any good producer, I just have an imagery in my head of I want to see the daughter in a shuttle going back to Deep Space Nine and not being too happy about it, and kind of a reintroduction of Deep Space Nine, and maybe Kira's still there.
Cool, stylized Deep Space Nine.
No, exactly. It has to be the Enterprise.
It wouldn't be though.
No, fuck. I know it wouldn't fucking be. The Enterprise E could totally be redesigned because they do that to ships all the time. But the Deep Space Nine would have to just be Terrak Nor. It would be so amazing if it could just be that.
Which that's something we haven't mentioned. Deep Space Nine was a pretty cool design.
Oh, I love
the Cardassian style, so they were able to get away from the whole Federation angles and
and it was
lines.
a mining station. It was just meant to mine dilithium. Ripped from Bajor. Oh, I love the design. And do you remember the episode where they went to its sister station, Terrak, Blanc?
Yeah. And it was just upside down, Deep Space Nine.
Kind of. And they went
pylon missing here.
That was the one where Garrett gets infected with disease and murders a bunch of Starfleet officers.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I have that ship. The original, when I was a little kid, I bought the I think it was Playmate's toy of Deep Space Nine. I still have it to this day. I don't know if that's ultimately going to make me look cool or sad.
That is going to get you so laid afterwards, Chris.
But
I hope that's hanging over your bed as we speak.
No, it's tucked away, but someday I do want to dust it off and put it up on a shelf somewhere.
I loved how like delicate and vulnerable it looked, because it was all
so
these
fragile.
skinny little hallways like all around the outer ring, and these giant pylons coming up and over.
And it was never scaled properly. There's two things that bugged me. The Defiant docking with it docked its little nose into the side. That little nose was a sensor pod. Again, the technical details of Star Trek fans. It would be too small to you'd have to like climb through the sensor pod to get into this docking port. And B, the Enterprise D, every time it was next to it, was like a third the size it should have been. Like, the circumference of the station was about the circumference of the saucer section of the Enterprise D.
Is that the real dimensions? Because the D parked up in one of the top pylons, right?
No, it's always ambiguous and different, because they say, like, in the technical manuals and shit, they say it's a certain size, which would line up to the visuals. But then, like, even in the final episode, Jake is sitting next to the window on the promenade that pulls out from the station. You go, oh, this is a really small station. Like, when you think of ops at the top of the station is about the size of the bridge of the Enterprise D, and you put those next to each other, if you have like the models or whatever, you go, oh no, the Enterprise should be like way bigger than they display it as. So that was always a little confusing. I was like, it was like the Defiant too. The Defiant size, they even admitted that in one of the making ofs. They were like, we change the size of the Defiant depending on what we want from that episode. It's like, we don't want like a big Cardassian ship comes in, we don't want this little fly buzzing around it. We want a fucking ship with meat, which I think would be cool. If it was a little...
Yeah, the Defiant was supposed to be like...
It was tiny,
had a crew of like 10, and you used to sleep on a shelf.
But yeah, I love that they straight admitted it. It's like, we just made it whatever size looked the coolest for that shot. And they were
assholes.
Yeah, they were showing examples of it. Like, there was a Romulan warbird. The Defiant was like this giant ship coming next to it, when in fact they should have been... But I think that's cool. I think that's a cool idea of a tiny little buzzing fly, but so overpowered that it just blows the fuck out of you. I thought that was really neat. But again, so the Defiant and Deep Space Nine were constantly shifting sizes dependent on what was needed for the story. But the official specs of Deep Space Nine are far bigger than the visuals of Deep Space Nine. When you look in the promenade and go, that takes up like a third of that center bulk. And people are really big in those windows. Yeah. So it never really made sense. But, yeah, I mean, I guess that's pretty much wrapping it up. I think we're at about an hour here. Happy 25th anniversary. Yeah. It can't, goddamn, I can't believe it's been 25 years.
You were dead, Star Trek, but I'm glad that you got us Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, I wish you just
rolled over and died.
You and Star Wars need to just go away.
Oh god, yes. Anything that starts with a star
needs to go away
for 20, 30 years.
Why don't you, like, okay, if you're desperate for sci-fi, remake Babylon 5. Like,
fucking Battlestar Galactica or something.
Do another Battlestar. But Star Trek is such a dead horse, and Star Wars is such a dead horse, is being beaten and beaten and beaten. But yeah, but still 25 years since its premiere, 18 years since it went off the air, but 19 years actually, went off in 1999. Its first and second season were both in 1993, so it went off this year in air in 1999, because its first season was January to like May, and then it started again in September for season 2. So 18, 19 years. Fuck, it's crazy since it went off the air.
You're getting old, dude.
You're getting old. But yeah, happy anniversary to Deep Space Nine. And hey, thank you for...
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming to my trailer
and
doing this podcast.
For anyone listening, that may have sounded cryptic and odd, but just so that the sound would work, we were in a little camper.
So my 3 kids that are very loud don't interrupt
very, very
us.
loud. The half of this podcast would have been just thump, 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 thump.
What's that? What's that?
You guys recording
What's a podcast? I want to watch Star Trek.
Thump, thump, thump. But, so we're out in a camper, sweating my balls off. But yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for doing it.
It was great.
It's very few people have watched Deep Space Nine, so...
Well, 2 out of the 3 are in this trailer right now. If this trailer goes down, then...
yeah, this is like having the
Deep
president...
Space Nine will never be the same.
This is like having the president and the vice president in the same plane.
Yeah.
This is gonna lose...
There should be a rule against it.
2/3 of its fan base. Anyways, so yeah, check us out, guys. Thank you for listening, first of all. Check us out at spaceactionheroes.com and at Bandcamp, spaceactionpodcast.bandcamp.com is where you can download or listen to all of our podcasts. And we'll be back again next week. DC has a few recorded with a friend of his from his hometown. A two-parter, I believe.
You won't have to listen to my whiny voice.
You won't have to listen to my whiny voice either. It's going to actually probably be something y'all want to listen to instead of a Deep Space Nine retrospective. And, until then...
For God's sake, go watch some good Star Trek. Binge watch Deep Space Nine. And if you see somebody that likes Discovery, piss on their shoes for me.
Yeah, and punch a Nazi. Those Star Trek motherfuckers, or Discovery motherfuckers, and Nazis. No difference!